What's up, everybody? It's your boy David Setti, and I am back with a brand new video. As always, I'd like to say thank you for taking some time out of your precious day to join me here on my channel. If you're new here, please subscribe, like, and share the video if you feel inclined. It's free of charge and it helps me out a lot. I'm going to get into a topic that I've touched on actually 4 years ago. And as if some of you have been on this channel for a minute, you know that I really don't get a lot of views. And that's okay. I think I kind of understand why I don't get a lot of views, because this channel I've changed it and rearranged it. I had videos up deleted for so long now that I think it kind of messed up my algorithm. And I think a little bit too, like, the topics and things like that I touch on is not really something I feel like YouTube promotes. And that's okay. Hey, this is the world that we live in. No judgment on my part. But I see that my Bible versus the Book of the Dead video, which I published 4 years ago, it says 4 years ago, which is currently sitting at 41,000 views, which is a lot more views I've ever gotten on any other video that I published on my channel. I'm saying that, my ancestors have been trying to get me to understand this is what we need you. This is where we need you to lend your voice. I tried to lend my voice in other aspects. If you follow me on Instagram, I'm very much into the Black ancestral occult magical community, and I've tried to kind of lend my voice there, but I wasn't really feeling it, because I know that when it comes to the topics that I'm about to touch on today, it flows out of me like nothing. I don't have to even think about it. It just flows out of me. And if you ever had a conversation with me, you know that, like, I can just talk about this for hours and hours and hours and hours. It's there. And I think that was my ancestors' way of kind of showing me that, listen, this is what we've placed on your heart. This is what you've incarnated back into this earth plane for. And I struggle with that because I'm the type of individual where I'm a very intellectual, philosophical type of man. And if I want to understand something or know something, I just go look up for the research myself. But my ancestors are showing me, like, listen, not everybody does that. They have the spark to want to understand, but not everybody has that same drive to go buy a bunch of books like you do with no problem. Or, you know, and I'm not trying to like toot my own horn or anything like that. I'm just trying to, provide some context as to why I'm making this particular video presentation. And now that it's a brand new year, I'm realizing that, it's time for me to really, truly walk in my purpose. And when it comes to the hero's journey, sometimes in the hero's journey, he questions, is this even my path? Like, why am I even doing this? Is this really, is anybody even listening to me? Is anybody even getting what I'm saying, or understand what I'm trying to do? And it may seem dark. And I'm saying this to those of you right now that know exactly what you should be doing, but you're hesitant, you're afraid, you don't know how you're going to be received. My advice to you is this: stop trying to be received by the collective, by the entire world. It may never happen. I think sometimes what we do, some of us, not all of us, is that because we live in a culture that is very heavily influenced by um celebrity, and we see how they're just admired by the world. And sometimes it may blind some of us to the fact that they actually really aren't admired by the world. They're admired by a very small fraction of the world. It just appears that they're admired by a very large percentage of the world. Now, I can see if you like Michael Jackson or something, Beyonce, but even they have people that don't listen to them, don't care nothing about their music, and then you have another person that's the biggest fan and just thinks that that's their world. So if you have a gift right now that deep inside, you have that gift. This is what your ancestors has placed on your heart. And this is the reason that you have reincarnated or incarnated on this planet for such a time as this. My advice to you is to put your voice out there, and whoever is destined to come will come. You don't need the entire world looking at you. You don't need, I mean, hey, even if you want to use this for an example, even Jesus only had 12 disciples, and half of them doubted who he even was. But they followed him because they felt in their heart that maybe, hey, he could, this could be somebody that could help Israel defeat the Romans. And bring the kingdom of heaven on earth. But that's another story for another day. But today we're going to get into the Bible versus the Book of the Dead. And this is going to be a series where I'm going to touch on different topics relating to this, because one of the comments that I kept receiving, that I've noticed at least from my first video, was, well, you didn't give us any examples. You didn't give us any examples. In my mind, I'm thinking, well, hey, listen, why can't you go find those examples for yourself? But some people just don't do it. So I'm going to do this series in 2022 for you all, where we go into different topics and different aspects of ancient Kemetic culture and the Hebrew Christian faith. If this video comes off as very simple level, I did that by design, because I really want this to appeal, and for people that are new on this path of understanding and new and are curious on this, can have an understanding of where to begin. My purpose on this channel is to spark your consciousness, not to tell you what destination you need to travel, or where you need to arrive on your journey. I'm simply here to just simply light a fire. You can either allow that fire to warm you, or you can reject the fire and walk away. Or, hey, some of us, we get so caught up in it that it burns down our house. That's not my purpose right there. My purpose is just simply to help you say, listen, if you're trying to light this fire, I'm gonna show you how to do it, and now it's up to you. I can teach you how to fish. Now you need to go and fish for yourself. So this is just to kind of give you guys a primer. Trust me, when it comes to these type of topics, you can go down the rabbit hole so deep that it just simply boggles your mind as to just what truly has been lost to humanity, what has been robbed of our ancestral knowledge. In everything I say in this video presentation, I say this in love. I'm not here to bash another religion. I'm not here to say that your God isn't real and mine is. I'm not saying that. Me personally, to give you some context, I am a Gnostic, and I appear to the Kemetic spirituality in my life. So that is more so what I represent. But of course, being an African American man, and like most of us that grew up in the United States, African American men and women, either we came from some sort of Judeo-Christian faith, and our ancestors kind of came to us one day and say, hey, we need you. And hey, we went forward. So please subscribe to the channel. With that being said, I don't want to waste any more time. Let's get right into it. I will have time stamps for this video. So this is kind of like an introduction, and then you can just go to each chapter as you see fit. That way you don't have to listen to this long drawn out video, because I'm trying not to make these things like 2 or 3 hours. I don't want to do that. But I do want to give enough knowledge in here. And, I know we're very fast-paced generation when it comes to keeping attention spans. And I know the algorithms like that too. So, I will have the timestamps that you can go to. And with that being said, let's get right into it. Now, today's presentation, we're going to be focused on the Bible versus the Book of the Dead, the Hebrew Christian hell, and the mysteries of the Kemetic afterlife. This is going to touch on the topic of the afterlife, not in its entirety, but when it relates to the concept of hell. When it comes to the Hebrew Christian faith, and I say the Hebrew Christian faith because that is the faith in which a lot of my people find themselves in today. A lot of it now, and I do believe in being honest, a lot of it has come through slavery, us here being, a lot of it has come through colonialism. But at the same time too, there, a lot of it has already been known in African culture. I believe that it would be disingenuous to me to say that Christianity or the Judeo-Christian faith was simply a slave religion, in the sense that to certain parts of Africa, yes, when it came, it was forced upon us, and it literally became a slave religion. But we have to understand, if you're new on this path, be very careful when they tried to regulate us simply to West Africa. We were all over this damn planet. We're going to get a little bit into that too in this presentation. And with that being said, not every African, not every indigenous person adhered to Christianity because it was forced upon them. No, a lot of our ancestors willingly, it was something that spoke to them, so they decided that was the path, the faith, that the spiritual, consciousness and stuff like that they wanted to go on. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. My problem the one of the problems that we will face on this journey is this. See, in this world, ignorance is what's truly keeping humanity in chains. When we go into this topic, we're going to be facing the Hebrew Israelite point of view and the modern day Christian point of view. Even the Bible says this, and if you hear clicking during this presentation, it's actually just, since I'm on my laptop, me going through different tabs to get the information that I need. Even in the Bible, in Proverbs chapter 4, verse 5 through 9, it says, "Get wisdom, get understanding, forget it not, neither decline from the words of my mouth. Forsake her not, and she will preserve thee. Love her, and she will keep thee. Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding," or understanding, as some of us like to say. "Exalt her, and she will promote thee. She will bring thee honor. When thou dost embrace her, she shall give thee thy head an ornament of grace, a crown of glory shall deliver to thee." Notice it says get wisdom, get understanding. It doesn't say what understanding to get. It just says get understanding. To my Hebrew Israelite brothers and sisters, and to my Christian brothers and sisters, I want you guys to understand that one of the things that even we in the conscious community can all agree on is this: our people are destroyed for their lack of knowledge. The Bible doesn't say the people are destroyed for their wrong political view or their their wrong gender identity. No, it says that my people are destroyed for their lack of knowledge. Let's make this clear. This society that we currently live on does not promote the getting of understanding, and it does not promote truth. This society promotes you living in a lie, whether that is some fictitious thing that you made up in your mind, or whether it's the lies that they spill to us on the 6 o'clock news every day. The CNNs, the Fox News, the MSNBCs, your politicians, your presidents, all that. Why do they promote a lie over the truth? Don't be blinded by their whole thing now that they're trying to push with the misinformation and false fake news. They have never. That's a recent political thing. This society has never, at least from the upper levels of society, have never cared about you receiving false information, has never cared about expunging the internet and getting rid of what they deem false information. Understand this if you're new on this path, so you don't fall in this trap. It's that they don't want you to have any understanding, or even if you don't agree with it, they don't even want you to have a, how can I put it, even an idea of an opinion different than what they have given you. In the ancient African Kemetic spiritual system, evil comes into this world by ignorance. In the Judeo-Hebraic Christian point of view, evil comes into this world because of eating from the tree of knowledge. Let that sink in for a second. In the African Kemetic point of view, evil comes into this world because of ignorance. In the Judeo-Hebrew Christian point of view, evil comes into this world because Adam and Eve allegedly ate from the tree of knowledge. For some odd reason, Yahweh does not want Adam and Eve to have any knowledge. He just said it. I understand that this may sound like I'm bashing Christianity and Judaism, and the Hebrew. No, I'm really not. I'm just listen. We've read it. We got the text. We clearly see it. But in that same Bible, it stresses that you get knowledge, that you get understanding. So why does God condemn humanity from eating from the tree of knowledge? But then in that same quote unquote word of God stresses the importance of getting understanding and getting knowledge. Because that will help you what? Fear the Lord. Just something to think about. Like I said, I'm just here to spark the consciousness, not tell you where it needs to go. So to my Hebrew Israelite brothers and sisters, to my Christian brothers and sisters, we have to understand that they approach the Bible as a literal historical history book, so to speak. More so the Hebrew Israelites, but the Christians do as well. Because one thing about the Hebrew Israelites is that they literally see their forefathers and their foreparents as the literal players within the biblical text. Christians on the other, black Christians on the other hand, and I'm just using black because I'm just coming from my people's point of view. Black Christians on the other hand do not necessarily engage in the biblical text as if those were their ancestors. They're under the assumption that they're what the Bible calls Gentiles. So depending on who you're talking to, they're going to come from it from a different level. It's different when you're reading a text and you believe that this is literally your ancestors versus these are just people that existed in the world. But this text is the word of God and it is the ultimate truth. So going into this, we have to keep this understanding that Hebrew Israelites believe that this is literally the historical, I like to say the socio-political spiritual text of the Israelite people. And then the Christians, this is just a historical spiritual text for them, having some basis in history. But a lot of times the people that are reading it don't necessarily connect with it as if those are literally their ancestors. So there's quite the different point of view. Sometimes I do like to look at it as this is that, and this is just me, that Hebrew Israelites, see, coming out of slavery in America, I completely understand what the black church and the Bible meant for a lot of us. See, the Bible to me, and even though I follow a different path, the Bible to me is not necessarily the Bible is a very powerful book. It got our ancestors through slavery a lot of times. We understood. See, I understand that the people that wrote that book were black people. And even though I do not agree with my Hebrew Israelite brothers and sisters as far as the Bible being a literal historical text, one thing I will defend them on is this, is the historical knowledge of the people that wrote that book being Afro-Asiatic peoples. Regardless of whether or not I look at it as like the literal word of God or literal history. So when I see other groups of people try to come at my brothers and sisters, I have to stand with them in the sense that no, these were Afro-Asiatic people that put down this text that you're following to this day. Regardless of whether or not you want to believe these were quote unquote black people. I always like to stress too that Egypt is always treated differently than the rest of Africa. And when Egypt and Israel are always treated differently than the rest of Africa. So when you say that these people were black people, we understand what we're saying when we're saying that these were black people. Other groups of people, when you say black people in their frame of reference, a lot of times is simply the black man in America, the black man and the black woman in America. And because they have been so brainwashed about who the black man and the black woman in America is, when you say that Jesus was a black man or the people in the Bible were black people, they're thinking of you. Now, keep this in mind. These are the same people that will stand outside and protest for you when Black Lives Matter this and Black Lives Matter that. But say those people in the Bible were black people. Say those people in the biblical text or in Kemet were black people and see how they react to you. That's why I don't get caught up in that whole we need solidarity and stuff like that. Because see, I know they only stand in solidarity to you as long as it fits their narrative, as long as the lie can continue, because see, a lie keeps your identity intact. The truth a lot of times breaks up that identity, that false identity, that thing you thought you were. That's why this society encourages us to live in a lie. Even when we look at, I don't mean to get too off track, but even when we look at this whole COVID thing that's happening, this COVID thing, the reason people feel so strongly about it, in my humble opinion, is because it has given them an identity. Everyday life is pretty much boring to a lot of us, but this has given these news outlets a newfound identity. It has given those who exist in self-righteousness a new identity, and virtual signaling a new identity. So we already know that to a certain extent, a lie can keep you believing something about yourself that you really aren't. And when the truth is introduced, it can either set you free, or you can hate that truth, shun it, because it breaks up this illusion that you've been so desperately trying to hang on to, that we as Black people have been so desperately trying to hang on to, because it gives us what, Black people? A sense of identity. Because I don't care what culture you come from on this planet, what ethnicity, what race, whatever you want to call it, you come from on this planet, human beings crave an identity. That's why identity politics are the name of the game today. Whether it's the LGBTQIA fraction, African Americans, whatever, like, it's all about my identity. Your pronouns. What does your pronouns have to do with your identity? So identity is very important to the human brain and to the human's conception of reality. So I thought I'd just throw that in there, because I'm trying to give us a context and a frame of reference, especially when it comes to the Bible. When I say the Bible versus something, we have to understand and where we're coming from. This isn't us debating Shakespeare versus H.P. Lovecraft. No, we're debating something where within this text, people have found their literal identity. My people have found their identity in the Bible for so long, because the text has brilliantly, in my opinion, fit with the struggles and the struggles and the triumphs of the Black man and the Black woman in America. And I understand why my Hebrew Israelites brothers and sisters see themselves within the Israelites, whether that be purely, DNA, genetic, ancestral wise, or whether that be simply a figment of their imagination. But I understand why we hold on. So even when we leave the Christian mindset and we become quote unquote conscious, a lot of the first things that a lot of us do is we go to the Hebrew Israelite thing. Why? Because we can still hold on to that Bible as a historical, literal text that we can't break away from. Honestly, it's because we don't have any other frame of reference spiritually on this earth. And our enemies have told us that any other frame of reference spiritually on this earth is demonic, is evil, is of the devil. So, of course, in Black people, one thing I know, say the devil is a part of something, I guarantee you Black people won't have nothing to do with it. Because that's just who we are as a people. You know what I'm saying? And I'm pretty sure there are other ethnicities and groups of people that are probably the exact same way. But all I can come from is my people's frame of reference. Now, another thing I want us to understand before we get into the overall core topic of this presentation is that I want us to understand too that your enemies know who you are. They know what you are, but do you know who you are? I like to point out the fact that I don't care what branch of Christianity you come from. The Roman Catholic Church is your mother. Let's keep it real. The fact that a lot of us even go around even today having a concept of being a Protestant is because the Catholic Church was the first one. Now, I'm not here to bash my Catholic brothers and sisters that still exist within their faith. But you do yourself, and we do ourselves, a great disservice not really looking at the history of the Catholic Church. Regardless of how it makes you feel at the end of the day, you have to look at the history of it. There are people right now that walk around here believing in neo-Nazi theology and all that kind of stuff. Why don't you even give them a chance? Not saying you should or anything like that, but let's just use it as an example. Why don't you even give them a chance for them to even sit down with you and for you to discuss and go back and forth their thought process and what they believe in? You don't do it because you understand the history of what Nazis in Germany did to people and what Nazis represent in this modern day world. And I personally feel like the same thing can be done with the Catholic Church. Now, the Catholic Church wasn't just strictly white man's thing. Even when you see here, the person that you see on the screen, Pope Saint Victor I, from 186 to 197 AD. He was the 15th Pope. This was an African man. So African people and Black people were very, very involved in Rome in the formation of the Catholic Church. This wasn't just strictly a white people, what we know of them today, type of thing. And even when we see what you see on screen, the papal consistory, it is a I call it a semi-ritual. And within this, the Pope, he appoints bishops and things like that as part of the Holy Roman Church. I'm gonna leave a link so you guys can read the article about the history of it. But one of the things they say that they perform, now this ceremony is performed publicly and privately. And as a rule of function, if you're new on this path, whenever your religious people perform something publicly, I guarantee you 9 times out of 10, they're going to perform something privately. And what they perform in front of you publicly is not what they perform privately. They do something that's very peculiar in this. This is the Roman Catholic Church, where the Pope performs what is called the closing and opening of the mouth of the new cardinals. Those of you who are real versed in Kemetic spirituality already know that the opening of the mouth is a staple, a very profound ritual within Kemetic spirituality. The opening of the mouth was used on objects, the newly dead, and also on temples to basically open up the spiritual awareness, or open up the spiritual and physical awareness of what was happening, pretty much. So if I died tonight in Ancient Kemet, they will perform an opening of the mouth ceremony on me. So in the afterlife, I was more, in layman terms, aware of what was happening around me. I was able to speak. I had my legs. So this was a very, very powerful ritual amongst our Afro-Kemetic ancestors. And to see that the Roman Catholic Church performed something very similar, and we already know that the Roman Catholic Church got a lot of what they practice, a lot of their regalia, a lot of what they do from Ancient Kemet, then I want us to understand that, listen, while we and the conscious, quote unquote, conscious community sit in these arenas, and these, not arenas, but these, auditoriums and stuff like that, debating one another about African spirituality, your enemy is actually using the rituals of your ancestors to this day. And then we wonder why we in the predicament that we in, and why they are sitting on top of the world the way they are. See, we can go and debate about who's right and who's wrong all day long. Don't matter, because whatever your enemy is doing behind closed doors, I guarantee you, it's either A, closer to the source, or they draw on some sort of power from it that you have yet to see, that beyond the bullshit, whether we agree about whether Jesus was walking around as a real man or whether Moses was a real man, whatever like that, they don't care nothing about that. They see the symbolism in it. They understand how the symbolism connects to the unconscious mind, and they understand that the unconscious mind, that's where you truly draw power from. So I thought I'd just put that out there a little bit to get us some sort of frame of reference, especially for us that are new, for those of you who are new on this path, that I guarantee you, they hide a lot of this stuff under satanic, Luciferian, Illuminati type of stuff, because they know that's what's going to scare you. 9 times out of 10, that's not what they're practicing ancient African spiritual systems, but they give it to you as this satanic stuff. And I was reading a really good book. I'm gonna have to I forgot the name of it. I think it's called The Throne of Satan or The Seat of Satan, one of the two. But the author goes into it and he said something that was very profound. He said that how the powers that be will do this. They'll deliberately throw out misinformation, since that's the popular term today, simply to cover their tracks, simply to have you thinking that that's what they're doing, but in reality they're not doing. And then they'll throw it out and it be so outlandish that the first thing that comes to your conscious mind is that's conspiracy theory. They don't do that. You see what I'm saying? But in reality they are doing something. But they give you a misstep, a misdirect. Look at it this way. Look at the child sacrifice and all the kinds of. I'm not saying that they don't do that, but what I'm saying is they throw it out in such an exaggerated way that most of the population is going to look at that. Now misinformation, conspiracy theory. I know that's what y'all like to throw around now when it comes to every little thing. It's there's nothing really new under the sun in my eyes. So keep this in mind if you're new on this path and you go down the rabbit hole, so to speak. Yeah, some things just may be outlandish conspiracy theories and don't really amount to nothing. But I guarantee you think you know how this world is ran. So now, and you can go and like Obama and say I missed him and stuff like that all day long. The Bible, they bet on that. Is this is my opinion, my humble opinion, political, spiritual book, in a sense of there are those who believe it to be literally the word of a god. There were people that used this book as the literal history of their ancestors. There were those that strictly use this book simply as a tools for magic, as we see in the traditions of my people. One of the traditions that we have of hoodoo and hoodoo conjuring. It's a very powerful book if you really know what you're reading and what you're looking for. So, like I said, I ain't here to bash the Bible at all. But then we have to understand too, because we see this a lot of times with the conscious community and their need to compare these two books. The Bible, but the Book of the Dead is a ritual book, point blank, period. The Book of the Dead actually, for those of you who do not know, and I'm saying the Book of the Dead just for, purpose, because that's what people have a reference of. And that's what people may come across if they go in a bookstore and see it. But the Book of the Dead is actually called the Pert Imian Heru, the Book of Coming Forth by Day. Some people say the Book of Coming Forth by Day from night. But the Book of Coming Forth by Day is a ritual book that was given, usually 9 times out of 10, it was either written on papyrus scrolls and buried with the dead, or it was written either on the coffins or on the tombs of our ancient Kemetic kings and queens and the noble. And if you was able to afford that in ancient times. The reason it's called the Book of the Dead today is because when the European was digging up our ancestral bodies from the deserts of modern day Egypt, he saw that this quote unquote book was buried with the dead. So he, of course, termed it in his childlike European language, the Book of the Dead. We have to understand also that Kemet did not have one book. So if you new on this path and you are into Kemetic spirituality, you're doing yourself a disservice if you're walking around with the Book of the Dead, quoting from it like it's the Bible. It doesn't really work that way. Now, when it comes to a magical text, an occult text, it can work that way. Because like I said, my people even use the Bible as in a magical occult way when it comes to traditions like hoodoo conjure. But if you are trying to look at this as some sort of book, like how people view the Bible, you're doing yourself a great disservice. And even though we say that that a lot of the Bible was taken, quote unquote, taken from the Book of the Dead, when I was debating the Israelites, one of the things I was trying to get them to understand is this. I know that there's a lot of jargon and lingo going around in the conscious community saying that the Israelites and the Hebrews stole something from Egypt. I don't look at it that way. In my humble opinion, the Israelites did not steal anything. They were influenced by the ancient Kemetic people. That's totally different. They were influenced not just by the Kemetic people, they were influenced by the Babylonians. They were influenced by the Assyrians. They were influenced by the Persians. The Israelites, and you can say I'm wrong, but this is just a historical fact. The Israelites were nomadic people. Of course, if you know nomads, they travel from place to place. They really don't have any sort of home or ancestral place to call their home. Most nomads don't. They travel from place to place, and so for my modern day Hebrew Israelite brothers and sisters that have such this antagonistic view against Kemet and what they call Egyptology, let's make this clear. And I'm speaking on behalf of my Kemetic ancestors. If it wasn't for my Kemetic ancestors, y'all would have starved in the deserts of Canaan. Let's keep it real. Your God constantly tells y'all in your own book, in the Bible, or in the Tanakh or the Torah, whatever you want to call it, you constantly have to go to Egypt, Kemet, to get what you need. It's a very rocky history, because one minute Yahweh does not like Kemet. Next minute you have scripture where he's saying that an altar will be resurrected to him in Kemet. And when your ancestor, one of the kings, I forget which king it was in the Bible, which is actually an historical fact. Like if it's a fact, it's a fact. Hey, what it is. But he reached out to a Kemetic pharaoh or king for help. And not only was he from Kemet, he was a Nubian. They didn't tell y'all no. They came to y'all aid. There's even archaeological historical evidence to say that when the Israelites were going through their so-called exodus, that Kemet at the time had a dominant hand within Canaan. That's why even if you look at Canaanite religion, you see Kemetic influence on it, because the Kemites were prevalent within the land of quote unquote Canaan, or what people call today the Middle East. That's just a historical fact. You can take it or leave it alone. I'm like I said, I'm not bashing nothing. It's just how it is. So I'm not here to say that the Israelites stole anything. What they were influenced by. And even when you get into the science and the historical sciences and spiritual sciences of Moses being even from your own Bible, Moses being raised in the house of the Egyptians or the house of the pharaohs, learned in all the wisdom. The Bible says that the wisdom of the Egyptians. It didn't say raised in all the false teachings and the misinformation and the devil worship of it says the wisdom of the Egyptians. And when we get into King Akhenaten, or the heretic king, as a lot of us like to call him, it goes deep. So to me, my Hebrew Israelite brothers and sisters are not my enemy, or like they're not antagonists in my view. It's just that there has been this schism that has been amongst us for a very long time, and we aren't able to sit down and say, because see, one group of people believe that their stuff is absolute truth, point blank, period, can't deviate from it, can't go wrong, and it's literally that belief is literally hanging on your eternal soul, versus our ancient Kemetic ancestors had many books, thousands of books that are probably lost to us to the sands of time forever. And you notice this white man that we like to say, that hates us so much, whatever like that. Notice he not in Israel like he is in Kemet in Egypt today. He's not digging up Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's digging up your African ancestors. He's trying to figure out what they knew. If anything, he's in Israel because he knows that he has to uphold a biblical narrative to keep people docile. And he has to keep finding some sort of historical fact in it to keep people believing in it. And then you wonder why NASA has recently hired 24 quote unquote theologians to come up with theories and things like that about how planet Earth would react if we came across aliens. And mind you, they just put their brand new telescope into quote unquote space. Like I said, I'm saying this in love, y'all. I'm not saying this to be hateful, or I'm just trying to get us to understand. This is what we're living with. This is the world that we live in. We can't keep going around here saying that woe is us. We were slaves. We were, the poor black man and the poor black one, and then we don't understand that you're dealing with an enemy that knows his shit. It has kept you under a spell because he knows his shit. He's not ignorant. He's not no fly by night type of person. He spends billions of dollars every year to study your ancestral science. That's a fact. So when we get into the Bible and the Book of the Dead, we have to understand that for some people, the Bible is literally all they have as a historical book, a historical context. The Book of the Dead is not that. It is a ritual book to aid the newly deceased through its journey through the afterlife. You have the Book of Two Ways. You have the Book of Caverns. You have the Book of Gates. Our Kemetic ancestors were very fascinated and very in tune about what needed to happen to the dead after they transitioned this planet. You don't really see any text. I know a lot of people like to mix the into a certain extent. If you ever read a book by Muwata Ashby, and he's a profound scholar, has done a lot to give us information about. I'm actually deep diving and doing a lot of research in one of his books today. But one of the things that I've come across that I don't necessarily agree with is this, our Eastern brothers and sisters, the Indians and the Hindu, and we get into reincarnation. When you get into Kemetic Kemetic spiritual sciences, there really isn't anything in their thing that says that, oh, we need to come back to this planet or we need to reincarnate. Their thing was, no, I died on this planet, I'm leaving this planet, and I'm going to hell on to a different state of existence. One of the things that we have to also understand too when we go into the Book of the Dead versus the Bible when it comes to the mysteries of hell and the Egyptian, Amenta, is the Bible strongly condemns contact with the dead. That's sorcery, that's witchcraft, that's magic, whatever you want to call it. The Bible, the biblical God strongly condemns his people communicating with any sort of dead person, necromancy and all that. Whereas from a traditional African point of view, our ancestors did not. There was nothing wrong with communicating with your ancestors. Life and death were very intertwined to a point that the dead has just as much influence on the living as the living have upon the dead. Ancestor contact, ancestral consultation, communicating with your ancestors, even in Kemet, was a very, very, very traditional. There was nothing that wasn't looked down upon. But for some reason, with the Israelites, and I can't put my finger on why there might be, for some reason with the Israelites, the Israelite God Yahweh, he strongly condemns communication with the dead. He strongly communicates. Now they may have not ancestral worship. The Israelites have what I call forefatherhood. That's different than ancestral veneration. Because whenever you get into, when you get into ancestral veneration, you have to acknowledge your mothers and your fathers. In the biblical context, you only acknowledge the fathers, so the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. it never really says the God of Sarah, Mary, and there's no female, feminine reality in the biblical context, apart from when the female is needed to either A, aid the man, or B, give birth to something. Let's just keep it real. So, I ain't trying to bash it or nothing. Let's just keep it real. That's really the only time the woman pops up. So we're dealing with a patriarchal, not only when we're dealing with two different, when it comes to the Bible versus quote unquote the Book of the Dead, not only are we dealing with two different spirituals, we're dealing with two different types of civilizations, a patriarchy based civilization and a matriarch based civilization. And they may sound very, simple, although there's just one was more, no, those have very profound consequences on the ideas of the people. Because if you look at your women as nothing but property and childbearing versus our ancestors that looked at women as the end all be all and the highest, you're going to see a different type of mindset when it comes to your relationship with God. That's just point blank period. In the Bible, God condemns the Israelites when they worship quote unquote Ashtaroth, even though there is historical evidence to point to the fact that at one point in time, Ashtaroth was considered the consort of Yahweh. In an ancient Kemet, for every male god, he has a female counterpart. But in the Israelite religion, that's vastly different. So now we know that you can look within the Book of the Dead, the Book of Coming Forth by Day, and see the influence. You can see where, okay, I see where the Israelites got that from, or where the Christians in the Ptolemaic and Alexandria period were influenced by that from, and put that in their Bible. But we have to be very careful and have to understand that the way your Kemetic ancestors looked at books and things like that is not the same way that the Israelites with their Bible today, Hebrew Israelites today, look at it. So let's get right into the whole thing of hell, the mysteries of the underworld when it comes to the Bible versus the Book of the Dead. For a lot of us growing up in the Judeo-Christian households, Judeo-Christian mindset and things like that, religion, we know of hell, and we know, but there's a very unknown part of it, especially when it comes to America. Let's keep it with this in this context, America, of a place called Sheol. Now, one of the things that I've seen in my studies that Christianity and Hebrew Israelite theology, mindset seem to be against is this idea that the Israelites did not have a put together religion like we think that they did. That the religion that we have today has been the result of thousands of years of changing and rearranging and redoing and reimagining what they needed for their people to have some sort of some sort of historical context as far as what they believe. For the longest time in Hebrew Israelite religion, the place called Sheol was actually the place that both the righteous dead and the evil dead went to upon death. The Sheol was the place of the dead where human souls go upon death. This place is not connected, though, with eternal punishment. There's two different things. We even see a little bit in, a lot actually, in the concept of Hades in the Greek spiritual system. Hades is a place that both evil people and righteous people go to. And when I say righteous, I'm put it in a context of how we in the society may put a difference between the two. So let's say a murderer and a person that's like a known serial killer and a good old righteous Christian, so to speak, in the ancient early Hebrew context, they would have went to the same place, Sheol. In Sheol, in the Hebrew Israelite context, this is a place where the dead they don't have any true real effect upon the living. Because like I said, Yahweh strongly goes against communication with the dead. In the Sheol concept of the afterlife, the dead don't know anything. They're almost like these phantasms, these the personalities, so to speak, of the dead. They don't really when you look at the Bible. So let's get into some of these scriptures right here. We have Ecclesiastes, excuse me, not chapter 9 verse 10, where it says, "For there is no work nor or not a thought or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol to which you are going." Psalms chapter 6 verse 5 says, "For in death there is no remembrance of thee," speaking of God, "in Sheol, who shall give thee thanks?" cries the psalmist. Isaiah chapter 38 verse 17 through 18. "But you loved my soul from the pit of destruction. You have cast all my sins behind your back. For Sheol cannot thank you. Death cannot praise you. The ones going down to the pit cannot hope for your truth." In Job chapter 3, 17 verse 19, it says, "There the wicked cease from troubling, and there the weary are at rest. Their prisoners are at ease together. They hear not the voice of the taskmaster. The small and the great are there, and the servant is free from his master." Job chapter 3, verse 17, verse 19. So we see that in the early Hebraic Israelite mindset, Sheol was a place that both righteous and dead go to, point blank, period. This Sheol does not seem to be a place, from the biblical context, a place where God's presence is felt. Because even King David said that in the Psalms, like, if I were to go to Sheol, where can I run from you, oh God? If I go to Sheol, you're there. But his presence in Sheol seems to be a presence of judgment, a place of justice, a place that is this aspect of Yahweh that is feared in the land of the dead. And God strongly goes against the communication with the dead. We get a little bit into it where it starts to change, but then the dead start to have some sort of personality in death. Because even King Saul in the biblical text contacts a quote unquote witch of Endor to speak to a dead person. So we see that they have a personality. This is actually not very far from the concepts in a lot of African spiritual systems, that when we're communicating with our ancestors, what we're really communicating with is not their soul. You're communicating with an aspect of the human spiritual complex, I guess, so to speak. The ancient Kemetic people called it the Ba, which is kind of essentially the shadow of the Ba, which is kind of essentially like our personality. So if I'm communicating, say for instance, if I'm communicating with my ancestor and it's my grandmother, for example, that is a personality. That's her personality that I'm communicating with. It's not necessarily her soul that I'm communicating with. Because if you want to say that, well, the ancestors have come back to us, then how is it that we're still doing ancestral communication if the ancestors are still with us in the flesh? There's different dynamics in the Kemetic point of view when it comes to the different levels of human consciousness. And we see that develop a little bit within the Hebrew Israelite context of hell, the afterlife, Sheol. So we clearly see within these biblical texts that there is no knowledge amongst the dead in Sheol. There is no wisdom. They cannot think. That life and death are two separate different things in the Judeo-Christian context. Versus in a Kemetic context, life and death are very intertwined with each other. So then we get into hell, Gehenna, the lake of fire. Within a Hebraic Judeo-Christian context, this is a place where sinful humans, fallen angels, and Satan go upon. Well, sinful humans go to this place upon hell and Gehenna, not the lake of fire. In some parts, it's intertwined, where the lake of fire is essentially hell itself. But then when you get into certain things like the Book of Revelation, some Christians in, well, I'm gonna say mainly Christians, like to interpret that as the lake of fire being a very distinct place from the hell that is happening right now, in layman's terms. So this is a place where sinful humans, fallen angels, and Satan himself go upon death. And at the end times, a place where eternal punishment for those who have either rejected God or his son, Yeshua Jesus. Keep that in mind. Eternal punishment. And we see in Matthew chapter 25, verse 46, and these will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. So we see here that there's clearly, from the time of the early Hebrew Israelites to the time of the Hebraic Messiah, Yeshua or Jesus, that the concept of hell and Gehenna has changed and Sheol has changed. They almost become one and intertwined. We have a place that's called Abraham's bosom. You might see that in the biblical text. That Sheol is pretty much a place of the afterlife. And in the place of the afterlife for Sheol, you have Abraham's bosom, and then you have the lowest parts of Sheol, where the sinful are burned up, or the fire of God. Whenever you see within the biblical text, God's wrath is always synonymous with fire and smoke and a consuming fire. That comes from an ancient Kemetic understanding of the punishment that happens to quote unquote sinners. I hate using that word, but for lack of a better word, sinners. So we see this bridging. We see this, okay, if the Israelites from the biblical point was in Egypt for almost 400 years, why wouldn't they have been influenced? That's just like us here in America, black people in America today. You wonder why the quote unquote African in Africa looks at you as something different a lot of times than him. Even though you share the same skin tone, the same DNA, but culturally he looks at you as something different. And that culture is enough for him to put a vast difference between you two. Now, let's get a little bit into the Kemetic afterlife and the lake of fire. One of the big difference between the Bible and the Book of the Dead, one of the big differences between Kemetic spiritual understanding and Hebrew Israelite spiritual understanding is this, or Hebrew Israelite Christian spiritual understanding is this. Death to our Kemetic ancestors is a journey, whereas to the Israelites and the Christians, death is you die and you just sort of, in so many words, end up in the place that you were destined to end up based on your beliefs in the in your life on earth. But in our Kemetic afterlife, it's a little bit different. So even if you were a sinful person, so to, for lack of a better word, or you were a righteous person, you pretty much end up in this point A in the afterlife, and you journey to a certain part, and then there's a part where there becomes a separation between where one goes and where the other goes. Since we're focused on the concept of a quote unquote hell, we see where the Israelites and the early Christians were influenced by our ancient Kemetic ancestors, in the sense that there is a lake of fire in Kemetic spirituality. The lake of fire, though, is different than the Christians, in the sense that the lake of fire is where it's, first of all, it's located in the east, in Amenta, which is where the sun rises. The souls of the sinners or the unrighteous or the enemies of Osiris, they burn up and they cease to exist. Within Kemetic spirituality, the ultimate punishment isn't eternal fire and brimstone, and it's actually to cease to exist. That's how much our ancestors valued life. That the ultimate evil was actually to just not exist at all. That was literally the ultimate evil. And that's where there's no concept in our Kemetic understanding of a God that's going to punish sinners for an eternity. That's not that in the Kemetic in the Kemetic spiritual sciences. At the lake of fire is usually guarded 9 times out of 10 by 4 baboons. As you can see here on your left, you see the goddess Amit. She was the devourer of souls. So if you were judged in the presence of Osiris and your heart was found heavier than the feather of Maat, she would devour your soul and you would cease to exist. It wouldn't be an eternal punishment like we see in the Christian context. But the four baboons that you see, one of the biggest things for those of you who are new on the path, if you truly want to understand Kemetic spirituality, all you really need to do is look at nature. One of the things I do on my own path is when I'm seeing one of the Neteru and they have a face of, say, a jackal. I'll literally go on YouTube and look up videos of jackals as people have observed them and taken videos of them, because that's what our ancestors see it. They observed nature. Baboons are highly wise and they're very fierce. So we see when the soul of the dead person goes to this lake of fire and he or she sees these four baboons. The spell, I hate to call it spell because my ancestors didn't call it a spell, but but for lack of a better word, a spell. We see in the Book of the Dead. If you want to go to for yourself and see it, you go to the Book of the Dead, go to spell 126. You'll see what he says to these four baboons: expel my evil, grip hold of my falsehood, that I may have no guilt in respect of you. Because these four baboons, spirits that are under the guise of baboons or under the image of baboons, they guard this lake of fire, and the deceased has to cross this lake of fire to prove themselves worthy. If you aren't worthy, you burn up in this lake of fire. So we see where this comes into the Christian context of sinners being thrown in the lake of fire. But the difference is in our Kemetic ancestors' understanding, God is not a God of eternal punishment. The unrighteous burn up, they go away, they cease to exist in this lake. Versus the righteous can pass through this lake and be untouched. We also see in the Book of Two Ways, spell 1054, we see it is the name, the lake of fire, of the knife wielders. You'll see a lot of times in Kemetic text that those who guard certain aspects of the afterlife are wielding a knife. 9 times out of 10, well, I won't say 9 times out of 10, I would say 7 times out of 10, it's a female goddess. This area of the afterlife is guarded over by Sekhmet, who is a fierce destroyer. I mean, even native Egyptians to this day fear Sekhmet. There was I forget what year it was, but not to get too off track, but just to give some context of what I'm talking about, there was these archaeologists, these boys had dropped a statue or whatever of Sekhmet and ended up dead. And the people, the native people feared that the Sekhmet had did it. So we clearly see that the fear of Sekhmet still is prevalent in that part of ancient Africa, or in that part of Africa. So she was a very fierce warrior. She destroyed the enemies of Ra without hesitation. And we see this when we get into these angels of vengeance, these angels that, pour out the wrath of God. That concept comes from Sekhmet, her being a Neteru, who's of healing, depending on what side you get on, and who is very wrathful, and who is very, she destroys those who go against the laws of Mayat. On the far right, in that black and white picture right there, you can see here the shades of the unrighteous dead being burnt up in the lake of fire in our ancient Kemetic sciences. We see that also too, that these are black, so these are usually represented as shades of the dead. The unrighteous dead in the ancient Kemetic understanding, they didn't get to become a fully formed soul. Their shade is usually just burned up, so they really don't pass on to anything else. So like I said, they end up on a journey, but their journey ends abruptly because they can't get past these four baboon Neteru or Amit, who devours the soul if they were found unworthy at the scale and at the last judgment. And we see this last judgment translated over into the Christian spiritual context, where sinful people, or sinful and righteous people, have to be judged at the last days at the great white throne judgment. And if you were found, if your name is found in the book of life, then you can go into eternal paradise. If you're found as not, if your name is not found in the book of life, you are sent and cast into the lake of fire with the devil and the fallen angels. That book of life, they get there from the scroll that Jehuti writes. He is the God of the Neteru of wisdom, God, for lack of a better word, God of wisdom, and he records your deeds and everything that you've done. So in ancient Kemetic, in ancient Kemet, we see here, you see here right here on your right, we see the newly dead is guarded and guided at this point by the Neteru god Anubis or Anpu, and his heart is weighed against the feather of Mayat. You see our meat there, she's waiting. There's actually 42. You can't see it in this picture, but there are actually 42 Neteru that are watching with very, very strong eyes to see if you're about to be found guilty, because they have a vested interest in you being found guilty. But that's another story for another day. And we see another form of Anpu here balancing the scales. And I don't know if you guys can see at the very top of the scale, you see the goddess Ma'at right there. And then we see here, right here, with the ibis head, the god, the Neteru, Jehuti, the god of wisdom, knowledge, understanding. He is, in so many words, the logos, he writes down. He literally, I guess, he's the word of God, and he writes down the word of God. And you can see he's writing right there on his stylus and the papyrus scroll. He's writing the deeds of what the dead has done in his life. So then we get in the Christian context in the Bible. If your name is not found written in this book, you will be cast over into the lake of fire. In the Kemetic context, the lake of fire, and also too, Amit, she would devour you. Now, this is a concept that we see prevalent in both our Hebrew Christian brothers and sisters and our Kemetic ancestors and our Kemetic brothers and sisters today. And there's this concept of what is called a second death. This is in the Bible, and it's also in what we call the book of coming forth by day, the book of the dead. We see here where the ancient Israelites and the ancient Christians were influenced by this, where in our ancient Kemetic ancestral knowledge, the second death, you had, of course, the death that you have when we die, when we physically die. But see, that really isn't, that's a form of death. But you still go on to a new life. And of course, I said that new life in our Kemetic sciences is a journey. But there's a second death that will be encountered, a second death that is feared by our ancient Kemetic ancestors. Like I said, in our Christian Hebraic belief, you have eternal punishment. Our African ancestors didn't look at it like that. The unrighteous, the evil, those who, the enemies of Osiris, they were destroyed and burned up, and they ceased to exist. So there was no eternal punishment of them. But the concept of a second death, we see, I'm going to start with the Bible, Matthew chapter 10, verse 24, where Yeshua says, "Fear only God, who can destroy both soul and body in hell." We also see in Revelation chapter 20, verse 14, where it says, "Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire." The lake of fire is the second death. But that's a more ancient concept than it comes from in the Bible, because we see here in the spell, or like I said, lack of a better word, spell. That's what they have it if you are going to read a translation of the Book of the Dead today. Spell chapter 44 says that, "I am crowned like unto the king of the Neteru gods," how they translate it, "and I shall not die a second time in the underworld." So we see here that where the Hebraic Christians were influenced by the Kemetic reality of this idea of a second death, that the second death is literally when the soul is either judged righteously or unrighteously, and is either in the Kemetic understanding it ceased to exist, destroyed either by being swallowed up by Amit or destroyed in a lake of fire. And then we see, but then within the Christian concept, though, the second death is a eternal punishment, meaning, I believe in Jesus even said, where the worm never dies, it never ceased to exist. We also see in a lot of Kemetic spells, so to speak, in the book of in the coffin text, where the deceased is warning against that the worm does not, that their body doesn't putrefy, that the worm does not overtake them. Now, it will make a lot of sense in my point of view, because even the Bible says that, like I said, for the Christians and the Hebrew Israelites that like to throw so much shade at Kemet, remember, Yahweh told Joseph, take the mother and the child and go into Egypt. He didn't say take the mother and the child and go into Europe, or take the mother and the child and go into Babylon, or take the mother and the child and go into a different part of Israel or Canaan. It said take the mother and the child and go into Egypt. Clearly, this young boy of Yeshua or Jesus was influenced or was amongst the temple priests in Kemet, saw what they saw. Why do you think that, and I don't want to get off in a tangent, but trust me, it all comes together. Why do you think that Yeshua is accused of being a magician by the Pharisees and the Sadducees during his time within Jerusalem, when the ancient Kemites were known as some of the greatest magicians of their day? Moses has to go up against who does Pharaoh call when Moses says that he got some miracles to perform? He calls his magicians, because the ancient Kemetic magicians were some of the most skilled magicians in the ancient world. The Romans and the Greeks testified to that fact. So if we see Yeshua using language that's very Kemetic, or for lack of a better word, Egyptian, it does not mean that you get what I'm trying to say. It means that he was taught, he was influenced by our Kemetic ancestors. And personally for me, I'm not saying that's the truth, but personally for me, it makes a lot of sense why that is. So we see that the concept of a second death is both prevalent in the Christian mindset, but it originated from the Kemetic mindset. So let's get a little bit into APEP and the Sebayut, Satan and the Fallen. For those of you who are new on this path and don't know, the concept of Satan, that old dragon, the devil, the old serpent, the devil, in the book of Revelation, he's depicted, if you're looking at it from a Christian end times point of view, he's depicted as this great dragon, which Michael and his angels fought against the dragon and cast him out of heaven. APEP and the Sebayut were actually the original concept of where that came from. APEP is literally the personification of evil, darkness. I mean, everything that you dread, everything that we have grown up in a Christian context and have been taught to fear and have taught to, just fear from quote unquote Satan. It had its origins in APEP and the Sebayut. APEP and the Sebayut are the ones that are chained up in the lake of fire, in the Kemetic understanding, not human beings, not human souls. They are not chained up. In the Christian context, they're chained up and tormented for eternity, but not in the ancient Kemetic text. APEP, which is this devouring serpent, because we have to understand ancient African spirituality, the serpent plays a dualistic role. There are gods that bring wisdom and understanding and healing that have serpent heads, or personified, with having serpent heads. Whereas in the Christian, in the Hebraic understanding, the serpent is pure evil, point blank, period. They get that from the concept of APEP. There are many incantations, many, I guess, quote unquote, spells against warding off APEP. As a matter of fact, in ancient Kemet, daily, the priests in the temples perform a ritual of banishing APEP, throwing off APEP. That's how our ancestors saw how dire this one entity was against upsetting the cosmic balance. Whenever there was a storm, whenever there was a cloudy sky, it was almost as if, and whatever covered up the sun, it was a personification of I guess, a natural phenomenon type of thing of the spiritual energy, I will say, of APEP. So it is he and his fiends, him and the enemies of Osiris. Him and the enemy of Osiris, a lot of times, are not the same thing as the unrighteous dead humans. They are just simply annihilated in the lake of fire. APEP and his fiends are, in many words, spoken of about being chained up. So we see here chains are cast upon thee by the scorpion Neteru. We see here, you see here in the pictures that you have of the soul warding off APEP, warding off. He comes into the form of crocodiles sometimes. He comes into the form of pigs or, things like that. But his dominant form is a large serpent. And they constantly have to ward him off, and they throw him into the lake of fire with chains and torment. That's what's tormented forever, not the dead. So I think that that's very powerful in the sense that we see even within this context where the Christians and in this point I'm gonna use the definitely the Christians, but even when we see with the ancient Hebraic understanding of a lot of times of a serpent being some sort of antagonistic spiritual force against humanity, they got that from the spiritual concepts of our ancient Kemetic ancestors of the serpent APEP being, and he was dreaded in ancient Kemet. He was dreaded amongst any sort of evil spiritual force. Like I said, rituals were dedicated against overthrowing him daily to aid Ra against his journey in the underworld when the sun has set. So all in all, this wraps up our this is the conclusion to this particular segment that I have of the Bible versus the Book of the Dead. Like I said, one of the reasons I made this is because I was seeing that from my video from, like I said, 4 years ago. Some people were saying, well, you didn't really show us any. I would have liked if you would have showed us some examples and things like that. And I don't want to make this as if I was bashing Christianity or bashing my Hebrew Israelite brothers and sisters and their beliefs. That's not it. What I'm trying to get us to understand is that even if you're saying that another culture was influenced by another culture, does not make your faith in what you believe and what helps you in a day-to-day life any less relevant. It's just that we do ourselves a great dishonor by not honoring where something comes from historically and not honoring those who came before us who achieved such great heights. Let's keep this. Imagine if we know that African Americans in I like to keep it real, slavery here in America, we know that we built the Capitol. I'm not gonna get into that because I don't want the FBI knocking at my door. But we know that we built the Capitol. Imagine if 1,000 years from now they say that, well, I guess this modern day, our long 1,000 years from now, our descendants and stuff like that, they live in a different world on Earth, and they look at the Capitol and say to themselves, well, aliens had built that. That could not have been the achievement of humans. Now, of course, I know, I'm just saying, let's just use it as an example. That could not have been the result of humans. Aliens, something had to have helped influence those people at that time. Because, humanity, we are a species with amnesia. For something, and this is another video for another day, I do believe that there are certain spiritual forces at work that want to keep humanity in this state of forgetfulness, that even though we have our ancestors, we look back at our ancestors and figure out, well, how did they do that? It's like the knowledge is just like lost, but those were our ancestors. So then how was the knowledge lost so much? I do believe there are spiritual forces, in my humble opinion, that wish to keep humanity ignorant because it benefits them. And I want my brothers and sisters out there that they're new on this path to realize, when you on this spiritual journey, and just take, in my opinion, everything in the spiritual world does not have your best interest at heart. Our Kemetic ancestors understood that. That's why you see that they go through such great lengths to aid the deceased against the horrors, I guess, that await human consciousness in the afterlife, to get you to the other side. And one of the biggest takeaways from this video is you can understand now that, if anything, to our Hebraic Israelite brothers and sisters and Christian brothers and sisters, death is a beginning and an end, point blank, period. Whereas to our African Kemetic, and I don't mean to separate the two, they really are one. So to our African ancestors, death is really just the beginning, and there's a whole journey that goes forward after that. So I hope that whoever is listening to this can take some sort of wisdom from it, can take some sort of knowledge from it. Maybe you've had an aha moment, like, okay, I get that now, or maybe this is what I've been feeling my entire life. Hopefully this helps you out. Like I said, I implore you to do your own research, to come to your own understanding of things. To our ancestors said that, to talk to the wise and talk to the ignorant, and sit down with them, and um, see what you guys see what you guys come up with. And I'm not saying that this is what I presented is the ultimate truth, but yeah, do your own research for yourself. And if you're truly, how can I put it, if you're truly sincere about this knowledge, if you're not using this to just simply say that I know better than the next person, or I got an upper hand on you because I know this, because like I said, it's our ancestors. Honestly, this was just minuscule stuff. This is basic stuff. And if you don't know how this knowledge can apply to your own personal day-to-day life, because I do believe that spirituality and our physical life, they go hand in hand, and they should work, then just simply reach out to your ancestors and ask them, how does this apply to my life? How can I use this to advance my life? How can I use this to advance my understanding of things? And I guarantee you, they will help you out. So thank you all for watching the video. Thank you all for subscribing, liking, sharing the video. If you would like, you can follow me on social media. If you have any other questions, you can hit me up. I'm more than happy to point you sort of like to some resources. I will never tell you, well, this is what you should be believing. No, I can point you to some resources, some books you can read, some articles you can read, some documentaries that you can watch, and just come with things with an open mind. Because like I said, to our ancestors, knowledge was the end all be all. Ignorance was the ultimate evil, point blank, period. It wasn't you sleeping with that man's wife. It was not you sleeping with another man. No, ignorance was the ultimate evil. So let me know what you guys are thinking, and you all have a great day.